Hi guys, welcome to the start of this reading vlog where I'm going to be reading only thrillers over the course of the next week. It's currently the week prior to Halloween, so what more perfect a time than now to read thrillers, and these thrillers in particular I have been saving specifically for this time of year. So let me show you guys what I have planned to read for this vlog. The first book I'll be reading is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This one is following a young woman whose father just passed away. Her father was an author who was most well known for writing a famous book about the house that they lived in. Supposedly this house was haunted and some paranormal type things went on in the house. Now that the daughter is grown up and the house has been left in her possession, she's going back to try and uncover whether or not the things that happened when she was growing up that were a little bit strange were actually the result of the house being haunted, or if there's something else going on. I am very excited to read this one. I've been saving it for October because haunted house and paranormal just screams Halloween time to me. I've also heard a ton of people say that this is their favorite Riley Sager book, so I'm hopeful that it will be mine as well. I've really liked everything that I've read from Riley Sager so far, but I just haven't been obsessed with any of his books, so I'm hoping this one will do it for me. The next book I'm reading for this vlog, I will actually be listening to the audiobook of, which I found on Hoopla, and that is 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. I'm actually going into this one completely blind. I know nothing about the plot. I just knew that I wanted to read a Peter Swanson thriller in October because he has become one of my favorite thriller authors of all time. My favorite thriller that I've read so far this year has been The Kind Worth Killing by him. I listened to that one on audiobook as well and absolutely loved it. Last year, my favorite thriller I read was Before She Knew Him. That was also by Peter Swanson. So I knew I wanted to read something off of his backlist for October. I eventually want to get through his entire backlist, but definitely now that it's spooky season, it's the perfect time to read a thriller by one of my favorites. So like I said, I don't know anything about the plot, so I'm going to be uncovering everything along with you guys, and I'll be sharing updates along the way. I also wanted to include an audiobook in this vlog so that I could get through more books more quickly, and I like being able to listen to an audiobook while I get other things done as well. And the last book I'll be reading for this vlog is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is her newest release that came out a couple of months ago, and I've honestly heard very mixed reviews about this book, so I didn't initially plan to read it in October, but then I heard it does take place over the course of Halloween night, so that really enticed me to go ahead and pick it up. This one I've also heard compared to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which I have not read, but I believe it's one of those situations where there's a group of people or a family and people start getting picked off and murdered one by one. And I know for this book, their grandmother, I believe, passes away and they're at her house for the reading of her will. And I've heard her house is surrounded completely by water and you have to take a boat to get there, which sounds like the coolest setting. I feel like this book is going to be very atmospheric and eerie, and it reminds me a lot of The Guest List. Even the cover is giving The Guest List vibes. So those are the 3 books I will be reading for this thriller vlog. I'm planning on picking up Home Before Dark first, but I'm going to also listen to 8 Perfect Murders throughout the day when I'm busy doing other things too, and just listen along, and I will keep you guys updated. Hi guys, I have started listening to 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. I am on chapter 2 and they just said why the book is called 8 Perfect Murders, and I love when that happens in books. So basically our main character used to work at a bookstore and his job was to run the social media accounts for the bookstore, and he ran the store's blog as well. So his very first blog post that he ever wrote was called 8 Perfect Murders, and he was basically just ranking what he believed to be the 8 best murders ever written in thrillers and crime books. And now in present day, in real life, there is an actual murderer who seems to be committing copycat crimes of the murders specifically on this list. So now there's a detective who is interviewing our main character, and she's trying to decide if she thinks he's kind of sus or if he could be an asset to helping her learn more about these books and uncover whether or not these murders are connected at all, and finding out who the real killer is if it's not him. Hi guys, another update from the same spot. I've literally just been listening to this book at my desk while I work, but I am 2 chapters later on to chapter 4, And one of the murders on his list of 8 perfect murders was from The Secret History. And he tells you before, he's like, if you don't want to know what happens in these books, I'm about to spoil it, so don't read this part. But he literally says like the whole plot of The Secret History, which is so funny since I just read that book 2 weeks ago. So I'm glad that I read that prior to reading this, because it literally would have spoiled it for me, which, like I said, he tells you, but still, I would have like had to know where to skip over. And it's just crazy that that is one of the murders on his list. So I just thought that was like a funny connection since I just read The Secret History. But yeah, the whole book was like literally spoiled in this chapter, so I'm glad that I've read it. Oh my gosh, I think this book is gonna have excerpts of the book that the dad wrote about the house. Hi guys, I just finished wrapping up a different reading vlog prior to this, so I was wearing the same outfit. If you recognize it, that's why. I was gonna change for this update, but I was like, nah, I'm just gonna be real. So I got to page 50 last night in Home Before Dark. I actually planned on reading a whole lot more than that, but I was getting so spooked. My husband's out of town for the week, so I'm home alone, and I think that's what is making this book so scary to me. Literally every noise I heard my house make, I was like looking over my shoulder. I was imagining that I was seeing things. My cat would be staring off into nothingness, as cats do, but it was just really freaking me out last night. And I normally don't get scared by scary stuff. Like, I love thrillers, I love scary movies, but this book and being home alone and the fact that it's like a haunted house story, I think just a combination of that was really freaking me out last night. After I made it to page 50 last night, I literally picked up the X-Hex and read it for 2 hours, because I was like, I need something lighthearted and funny, like when you watch a scary movie and then you need to watch Disney Channel after to go to bed. So I did not get much sleep last night, and I had a nightmare. Yeah, this book is just really having an effect on me, but I am really liking it so far. I'm so invested, and I'm so curious to know whether or not the story this dad wrote about the house is fictional or if it actually happened. I didn't realize the daughter's stance on it was going to be that she thinks it's a lie and it's all made up. She was only 5 years old, so she doesn't remember anything happening, but she thinks her dad just made up this whole story about the house to try and get some cash, because they were kind of hurting for money at the time. So her dad's passed away. Literally his dying wish to his daughter was not to go back to the house. He said it wasn't safe for her. And then she has lunch with her mom like a few days after, and she's like, Mom, tell me the truth about the house. Like, I need to know, I need closure. And the mom is like, yeah, it's all a lie. But then right before they're about to leave the lunch, the mom is like, but you should just sell me the house. Just get it off your plate. Let me take care of it. Have it out of your hands. And so the daughter kind of takes the mom's aloofness as she's not telling her the full story. So the mom, in her own kind of weird way, has told her not to go back to the house. The dad told her not to go back to the house. So naturally, she's going back to the house. So I'm kind of scared for her. I'm scared to see how much spookier this book is going to get. And I'm also so interested to know if it's really haunted or not. I also think it's so curious that our main character, her name, I should know it, is Maggie. Maggie's job as an adult is to renovate and flip homes. So I think it's just kind of weird that she is associated with this really notorious house for her whole life, and she thinks it's a lie and she doesn't like being associated with it. And now her job is to flip homes. It's like literally in the same kind of industry. I don't know, I feel like that might come into play later, but we shall see. I am very invested in the story and really liking it. I'm just finding it super, super creepy while I'm home alone. I've also made it to the 70% mark in 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson, and I'm really liking it. I don't think it's quite as captivating as some of Peter Swanson's other books that I've loved, but we're getting a lot of backstory on our main character, Malcolm. We're learning a lot about his past and his relationship with his wife. And there are a bunch of little characters that keep being mentioned and kind of a little tidbit about them. And now they're all slowly coming into play as part of the plot, which I love when books do that, and it like wraps everything up and ties everything together in some way. I feel like Peter Swanson is really good at doing that with characters, and he makes his characters so interesting and intriguing. So I am really enjoying that about it. I'm curious to see where it's gonna go. So I will update you guys when I have more thoughts.
Deep blue, garishly illustrated with a close-up of a man's face and a sickly-looking woman with red hair. Gwen picked up after one ring. "Hi, Gwen," I said, and her first name sounded strange coming out of my mouth. "Thanks for calling me back. So, this book. What did you think?" "Bleak. I knew the story because of the movie, but the book was different."
This has just become my update spot, I guess. But hi guys, I finished 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson like 20 minutes ago, and I really enjoyed it. It definitely became more of a mystery than a thriller, but it was kind of like an ode to mystery novels, and I really appreciated that. I feel like the plot was really well constructed and everything was really well thought out. I definitely could have done with a few more thrills and some more twists and turns, but overall I did really like it. Not my favorite Peter Swanson ever, but I think I've realized that I enjoy his earlier novels better than his newer novels, because my 2 favorites of his that I've read were older books of his, and then my 2 least favorite, which have been 8 Perfect Murders and Every Value Break, have been newer novels. So I think I'm gonna backtrack a little bit for my next Peter Swanson read and start with some of his earlier releases, because I seem to enjoy those more. But overall, I did really enjoy 8 Perfect Murders. I probably would rate it somewhere between 3 and 3.5 stars. I'm still undecided, but overall, it was good. It was a solid mystery novel. As for Home Before Dark, I have made it to the 75% mark, exactly 75% according to Goodreads. I'm on page 295, and I am really, really liking it. This is definitely my favorite Riley Sager so far. It might end up being a 5-star if I like the ending. My only critique right now is that it's getting just a little bit repetitive, but I'm really enjoying the story, so I don't mind that it's kind of the same thing every day. I'm so curious to know whether or not this house is haunted, because if it's not haunted and it's something else going on, I don't know how all the things that occurred in this house could be something that's not paranormal. So I am like so into this story, and in a weird way this book kind of reminds me of Verity. I feel like Maggie reminds me a lot of Lowen, and just the back and forth between the chapters of the novel that the dad wrote and then Maggie in present day, like having conflicting feelings about what the truth is. It's kind of giving me Verity vibes. So I've never heard anyone ever make that comparison. It's kind of a stretch, but it's just kind of giving me the same vibe. So I am loving this so far. I really hope that I like the ending. I'm probably going to finish it very soon, and I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney tonight, since I finished 8 Perfect Murders. Last night I finished Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and I absolutely loved this book. Not only is it my favorite Riley Sager book that I've read so far, but it's one of my favorite thrillers that I've read, as well as just one of my favorite books in general of the year so far. It was so, so good. And I can't decide if I want to rate this book 4.5 or 5 stars yet. I need to sit with that for a little bit longer, but I did thoroughly enjoy this one and loved my time reading it. My only critiques were that it got a little bit repetitive throughout. It would kind of be like the same thing in the house every day with just a little bit of variation, and then the ending was just a little bit underwhelming, but I feel like it was the best that it could have been for the story. So I still really, really enjoyed it and loved this book so much. If you like Haunting of Hill House, I think you'll really love this one because it has the same kind of vibe. And one thing I think Riley Sager does so well, all of his main characters in his books, I believe, are young women. At least all the books of his that I've read so far are, but they don't feel like they're written by a man. And a lot of times in thrillers in general, the characters are kind of an afterthought and they fall a little flat, since thrillers are such a plot-heavy type of genre. But all Riley Sager's books that I've read so far, his main characters are really well developed, and I love being inside their head, and they feel very genuine and realistic to me. So loved this one, highly recommend it. A great second pick for this vlog. After I finished Home Before Dark, I did pick up Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. And granted, it was after midnight when I started this and I was so tired reading it in bed. I just could not get into it, and I made it to chapter 3 before I just had to put it down because I could not focus on this book at all. So I picked up the audiobook today to try and get into it, and then I thought once I'm into the story I will read it physically. But the audiobook narrator, I believe, is the same person who narrated The Club by Ellery Lloyd, which she's fine. She does a great job narrating, I think. But I now keep comparing this book to The Club, and they don't really have too many similarities other than the problematic, unlikable characters, the dysfunctional family dynamics, and the settings are kind of similar. But because of the narration, I feel like I'm just drawing all these comparisons and it feels like I'm reading The Club again. But then when I had a break today, I listened to the narration along with reading it physically, and that did help some. So I think what I need to do is just ditch the audiobook altogether now that I'm on page 100 in this book, and just read it physically from here on out, because I feel like this is definitely its own story and I need to appreciate it for what it is and just try and get into it. Hi guys, I'm on page 214 in Daisy Darker. I am reading it completely myself now, and I've kind of ditched the audiobook, and I'm definitely enjoying it more. I feel like I'm picking up on all these little details that I wasn't noticing before. But unfortunately, I'm finding this book to be very boring and slow, and it's kind of dragging for me. One thing I've noticed about these books that take place over the course of one day or one night is there's not enough action that happens to make a whole book out of it. So usually there's like another timeline or there's flashbacks, and in the case of this book there are tons of flashbacks sprinkled all throughout. Literally every other page it feels like there is a flashback, and they're all relevant. Like they all tell us a little more about each of the characters and their backstories and what's playing out in present day. So I understand why they're there and their importance, but at the same time I just find them really, really uninteresting to read about. So I'm feeling a little bit conflicted. Like anytime a flashback is being set up, I'm like literally the Michael Scott meme where he's like, oh god no, because I'm just so sick of the flashbacks and I don't really care too much about learning more about the family. I just want to know who the murderer is. So I'm hoping this book has a great ending to tie it all together and save this book for me, because right now it's just a little bit boring. I finished Daisy Darker and I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it was very well done. It is my favorite kind of twist. Now I want to go back and reread the whole book because I'm like, how did I miss this the whole time? I feel like my brain got tricked and I took all these mental shortcuts to piece together what I thought was happening when what was actually happening was like there. It was just like hidden in plain sight, and that's exactly how I felt after I finished Rock, Paper, Scissors. So now I really want to read everything by Alice Feeney because I love those kind of twists. That being said though, I don't really think the payoff was worth it. Like I said in my last update, I found this book to be pretty boring and slow, and I just didn't really care about the Darker family. I found them to be not only unlikable but just uninteresting. So I was really just reading to find out who the murderer was going to be. But yeah, I would probably give this somewhere between 3 and 3.5 stars. Hi guys, I wanted to end this vlog with a little mini wrap up and just an overview of everything that I read, as well as some final thoughts. So the first book I completed for this thriller reading vlog was 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. I listened to this one on audiobook. Peter Swanson is one of my favorite thriller authors, and I feel like this book was him branching out a little bit. It was more of a mystery, and I definitely wanted more twists and turns out of this book as opposed to solving this mystery along with our main character and it being a whodunit kind of story. Our main character, I would say, was not quite as intriguing as some of Peter Swanson's other characters in other novels. I wasn't as into his backstory as I usually am in a Peter Swanson book. But that being said, I feel like the plot was really well constructed. The concept was super cool. I loved that it was an ode to mystery novels and just an appreciation of books in general. And there were a few things that happened throughout that took me by surprise and I was not expecting. So I gave this book 3.5 stars. Then I read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. by far my favorite book that I read for this vlog, as well as just one of my favorite thrillers of the year in general. I am going to be recommending this for years to come. It was so good. I had such a fun time reading it. I was seriously spooked reading this when I was home alone, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I had no clue what to believe or who to trust. My only critique is that the ending was just slightly underwhelming, but I am super picky when it comes to how I want my thrillers to end, because I feel like nothing shocks me, and I'm just always hoping for a huge climactic shocking ending. And this one didn't quite live up to my expectations, but it was still really well done. I feel like it fit the story perfectly and wrapped everything up nicely. So I still really loved this book, highly recommend it. 4.5 stars. Then I finished out the vlog with Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This one is also more of a whodunit type of mystery as opposed to a thriller, which I wasn't expecting. Overall, I wasn't super intrigued by the Darker family, and I found the story to be slow and a little bit boring, but the ending was really, really well done. I was taken by surprise and I thought it was super good. Alice Feeney is a wonderful writer. There were some really, really beautiful quotes throughout here, which you wouldn't expect in a thriller, but her writing is just truly wonderful. I want to read everything from her. This just wasn't quite doing it for me because of the characters and how slow paced it was. I wasn't a fan of all the flashbacks and getting all these characters' backstories, but the ending was really good. I just don't think it was quite worth the payoff. So I give this book 3.5 stars as well. Alright guys, that is going to conclude this thriller reading vlog. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Leave me a comment down below if you want to chat about any of these books, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.